Super excited to have on with us today Joe Stout. Joe is a Christian. He's a husband. He's a father. And we're going to talk about his faith and even decisions like homeschooling your kids and really influencing, discipling them in a kind of an upside down, confused culture. So I'm excited about that. But he also runs Mount Capra, a 90-year-old family business, and Mount Athos Performance, which produces health supplements from his farm's 500 goats. We're going to talk about that. I've got a lot of questions about that. And so excited about that. But through all of it, Joe and his family inspire others to persevere in faith, family, and purposeful living. Really excited to have you on today, Joe. Thank you for joining me and looking forward to this conversation.
I'm excited to be here, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
So talk about your family, talk about, your faith and how you got to doing the work that you're doing now.
I would love to. So I have a heritage of, again and again, God's faithfulness just pouring out. We talk about, our culture loves to talk about privilege. Well, I talk about my covenantal privilege. I have Christian parents that go back, my parents, their parents before them. So I have tremendous covenantal privilege that I don't want to take for granted. God has been just incredibly kind to my family. I grew up in a Christian home. My family gave me that heritage from as early as I could remember. And my dad actually, both my mom and dad they grew up in the city, kind of just north of Seattle, Washington. But they both really were drawn to more of the rural life. This was back in the 70s. And so he knew nothing about farming whatsoever. My mom was a teacher. He says, hey, go find yourself a teaching job. Just make it someplace that's rural and I'll find work on farms and I'll learn how to farm. So he originally started learning how to farm using cows, of course, because that's the main thing that Americans drink is cow milk.
Right.
And then as he kind of grew in his abilities, he took over his own cow dairy. But then there was an event that happened in 1980. It was in May of 1980, and that was when Mount St. Helens blew up. And that impacted a lot of the farmers at the time here in the western part of Washington State. And so he actually used that as a time to transition from cows into goats. And at that time, there was another father-son team that was running a small family dairy called Briar Hills Dairy at the time. And so back in 1985, he actually took over their farm and their business. They made raw milk cheese. They kind of did the whole thing from start to finish, raw milk cheese. And then also kind of before there was really a health food industry, they were producing health food products. And they had been doing this since 1928. So my dad took that over. I was born in 1984, and I spent my entire life, all of my known memory on the farm, around goats, around farming, around the dairy world. I love it. It's in my blood. And back in 2012, I was actually able to move to the family farm. My wife and I, we built a house here, and God has blessed us with 10 children. And my sons and my daughters are working on the farm too. So we've got three generations right now. My mom and dad are still in great health. And we're all working the farm and the family business. And in a nutshell, we're just loving the life God has given us, and just see His hand of blessing. Psalm 65 says, "The paths of God drip with abundance," and that has definitely been what we have experienced.
Did I read that your dad is a physician? Is he a doctor?
Yeah. So my background is in nutrition. I've got a bachelor's and a master's in nutrition, and he decided when he was 65 years old, he wanted to go back to school. And he told me, I really want to just go get nutrition, but I think I'm going to do the naturopathic program. And so he ended up becoming a naturopathic doctor.
When he was 65?
At 65 is when he started. Sure. So it took him a while to finish, but
Sure. That's incredible. Talk about the benefits of, there's a lot here, but I think people hearing you talk about, goats and all that's involved in that, right? Like transitioning from cows to goats, and talk about the difference and why one would be better than the other, why, you have 500 goats. I don't know that everyone can relate to that.
Yeah, exactly. 500 goats is a lot of goats. Most people, when I meet
It sounds like a lot.
it is. Most people say, "Yeah, I had goats. I had one or two. How many do you have?"
Yeah, right.
One of the main things about goat milk that is, it's interesting on a couple of levels, and I won't take the entire time of our conversation just to talk about the benefits of goat milk, because there are many, and it'd be a long conversation. But goats are actually more prevalent worldwide than cows, simply because a lot of the world is developing still, and in developing countries, it's way cheaper to get a goat than to get a cow. It's way easier to raise a goat than it is a cow. If you butcher a goat, you don't have 1,000 pounds of meat. You've got, maybe 50 pounds of meat. And so goats are very common worldwide. They're pretty uncommon in the Western world. But one of the benefits of goat milk in general is that it closely resembles human milk. Actually, all the way down onto the DNA level. If you actually look at the DNA of goat milk versus human milk, they're much more similar than human milk and cow milk. And so what our customers find, is that dairy, which is an incredibly powerful nutritional ingredient. It's like one of the most perfect nutritional ingredients out there. A lot of people have found themselves kind of excluded from the dairy world because they just can't digest regular dairy. They can't digest, they can't absorb it. It does funny things with their bodies. Not all of them pleasant. But goat milk actually gets them into the dairy world, where they get to harness a lot of the nutritional power of dairy without some of those side effects that affect a lot of people. Cow milk allergy alone is the number one food allergy for kids under 3. There's nothing a kid is more likely to be allergic to than cow milk. But that we don't see that as much with goat milk, and with older populations, as they become more sensitive to cow dairy, oftentimes they are still they tolerate very well, and in fact thrive on goat milk products. So it's very niche. 500 goats sounds like a lot, but in the dairy world, it's not that big. It's just big for goat dairies. We're by far the largest goat dairy in Washington State, but we're a drop in the bucket compared to the cow dairy world out there.
Yeah. How did you move from kind of the dairy, I'll say industry, or the world of dairy, to supplements? And you guys produce all kinds of supplements. It looks like your catalog of health supplements would be something you could find probably anywhere in a GNC or something like that. So how do you move from dairy to doing that, and then why?
Yeah. So one of the reasons why we moved from cow to goat in the first place was because back in the 80s, there was this big agricultural push from the federal government level to get big or get out. And so you saw an enormous amount of consolidation of family farms in the 80s. It used to be that family cow dairies were all over the place. You could raise a family with a small cow dairy. But then with the government's hyper focus on hunger and ending hunger, the best way of driving down prices is to scale operations. And so you can become way more efficient if you have a 10,000 cow dairy than if you have 1,000 10 cow dairies. And so they wanted everybody to get big or get out. And so my dad essentially took that advice and said, I'm transitioning out of, essentially in the cow world, the government sets the price of the milk. You're at the mercy of whatever they do. And the only real control you have is to get bigger, is to just grow your operation. In the goat world, because it's niche, there's a lot more variability on, we can connect with our customers, whereas most dairy producers that produce cow dairy can never connect with their customers. All they can do is connect with the processor, and then they just get whatever the processor gives them. So there ends up being a lot more, that maybe your listeners have heard, the riches are in the niches kind of thing. There, if you can find a way of serving a customer base directly, there's a lot of value to that. So that's kind of what we did. And the nutritional supplement angle of things just made sense. We've been doing exclusively nutritional supplements now for probably 25 years. And that just made sense as the market grew. And everything logistically is easier to handle with nutritional supplements than, say, something like a refrigerated cheese or something like that. The refrigerated world really needs scale for it to be profitable. Whereas we can, if you take all the water out, then you have you've got a lot easier product to handle. So that was, there was a lot of that. Plus we found we were doing a whole lot more good with our customer base with the nutritional supplements than with the cheese anyways. So.
Yeah, that the supplement world is interesting. I've been involved in endurance sports for a while and, trained jiu-jitsu for a long time. And so finding a supplement that is clean, that is effective, and that's portable, right? I mean, and that's a reality. You can buy something that requires refrigeration and those kind of things, but you can't take it with you. You can't travel with it. And a lot of what's out there, and there's a lot out there, it's just kind of junk. It's just not any good. So finding good supplements, it's not easy. And it's a world that if you're not super involved in or willing to study an awful lot, you just don't know what you're getting.
Well, and one of the interesting things too, Jeremy, is that I would say the vast majority of supplement companies they're essentially marketing companies. They don't produce the product. They don't package the product. They developed the product, or they went to a co-packer and they said, "Hey, here's our specifications. Can you make this for us?" But for the most part, what they're bringing to market is fancy marketing, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just one of the things that we pride ourselves on is like we own the goats, so we have the farm. We have the processing facility where we actually do all of the work, or a lot of it, not exclusively all, but a lot of the packaging and processing ourselves. And then we actually do all the fulfillment too. So if you have a problem with it, you can call us. You get a real person. They can actually talk to the farmer. All of those kinds of things, which in the nutritional world, you don't really see that a lot.
Yeah. That's really cool. I could talk about that all day long.
Right.
One of the things that jumps out to me though is, and we talked about this real briefly before we started. So your family obviously is very intentional. I mean, it sounds like your parents very intentional. Your dad saying, "Go find a job, find it in this kind of place. This is where we want to live. This is where we want to raise the kids." Right. So that's very intentional. I don't know how to farm, but we're going to figure it out. And then you making a decision with your education, with where you're living, where you're raising your kids, how you're raising your kids, all that's very, very intentional. And it sounds like connected to your faith and your understanding of God and what God would have for us to do. So how do you articulate, or how do you think about this, bringing together of health and fitness and even supplementation and, all of these things and faith? Because I've had this conversation on both sides. I've had the conversation where Christians say, "Well, that's vain. It's a waste of time. It doesn't serve a purpose." So you have that kind of end, which is easy to argue against. And then you have the other side that's kind of like, I spend 80% of my time worrying about my health and exercising and training and doing all these things. It's very easy to get pulled into that. How do you think about that in terms of why it's important to take care of our bodies, what that means in terms of our faith, and how we understand the balance in all of it? Because it's very easy in the world you live in and in the fitness world to get out of balance. How do you think about all of that?
That was a huge, so we have essentially two brands. Mount Capra is the one that's almost a century. In 2028, it'll be 100 years old.
Wow.
But then a couple years ago, we started another one called Mount Athos, and that is specifically, it's a brand that is specifically performance targeted. So it's like for people who are looking to achieve better performance gains, whether it's in endurance sports or just longevity in general. But one of the big focuses for my team has been to make sure that we tell our customers, or we live the life that we walk the walk. We walk the talk, of rejecting the vice that is just so prevalent in the health and wellness industry. Because there is so much vanity. There is so much, just self absorption in that world. And of course that, the last thing you want to do is have your soul go to hell in a perfectly toned body.
Right.
That would be gaining the world and losing your soul.
Yeah, that's right.
But to the other side of it, there is a golden mean where there is, like, you definitely don't want to get out to the extremes of like my health doesn't matter at all, to like, I worship the ground I walk on kind of thing, and my own health, or I'm terrified of everything. But there is a golden mean where you recognize the fact that God has given you the gift of life. We should be every day thanking him for this gift of life. And if there are things that we can do to rightly steward that gift, we should be doing them so far as it doesn't become the thing that defines who we are. So I'll give you an example. If you are a father and you have little kids, I've got those. It's not a bad thing for you to want to stay alive so that they can grow up with a father. That's not a vain pursuit.
Right.
It's not idolatrous. And furthermore, it's not vain or idolatrous for you to be in good enough shape that you can pick them up, that you can play baseball with them, that you can protect them. We want heroic fathers who are willing to lay down their lives, but we would rather have heroic and effective fathers who are strong enough to be able to effectively protect their families and not have to be in the area or in the world where they are always the prey, so to speak. So as far as that goes, a lot of that comes down to, are you going to take dominion over all of the aspects of creation that God told us to take dominion over? Because our health is part of this world. My daughter and I, she's coming up on her 13th birthday, and we went out to breakfast this morning. And as we drove, we were listening to Proverbs 23, and I was struck by. I read Proverbs 23 many times, but Proverbs 23 is it's all filled with these sayings about how to discipline yourself, how to discipline your will, how to discipline your body. If you're a man given to great appetite and you find yourself in the house of a king, put a knife to your throat, kind of thing. Yeah. Don't spend your whole life slumbering away. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands for rest, and poverty will descend upon you. And then it talks about not being a slave to wine or beer or strong drink. So it's like our bodies need to be they need to be put under the authority of Christ, just like the whole world is under his authority. And we don't do God's kingdom any good by dying early deaths because we've just neglected ourselves. And so that really it needs to come in the proper order. So your health is not the most important thing, but just because it's not the most important thing doesn't mean it's not important at all. And so that's I think, the striking that golden mean of not spurning the gift, the birthright that God gave you in the form of your health and your life, but also not making the opposite mistake of thinking that that's all that matters in life. Yeah,
that's good. I like thinking of all these things in terms of priorities. You're like, your number one priority. My number one priority should be to honor God with everything that I do. It's all about honoring God. Well, then God gives me a body, so I need to take care of that body so that when God calls me to do something, I have the physical wherewithal to do that. I need to steward my finances, not so that I can have, whatever I want, but so that I can be used financially to serve the purposes that God's called me to. And on down the list. And when we think about it that way, to me, it starts to make a whole lot more sense. I've told my kids several times, one of the things that I fear, probably the thing I fear the most in my life, like a fear, right? And we could talk about the value of fear or whatever, but I think it's a godly fear. What I fear the most is that God would call me to do something or lead me to do something or open a door of opportunity, and I either physically or financially can't do that because I've made bad decisions. Not because God hasn't, opened those doors or called me, but because I haven't taken care of, stewarded over what he's given me to do that. And I think the way that you articulated that is exactly right.
Yeah, I think the fact of the matter is that we have been given a gift, and what's the best thing you can do with a gift? Well, it's be thankful for it. And so, if whatever you're doing is done out of a heart of true thankfulness unto the Maker who gave you this gift, then you're doing that by faith, and God blesses the work that men and women do by faith. That's absolutely true. And Thanksgiving, true Thanksgiving, is a work of the Holy Spirit, and that shows that you're not idolizing or spurning this gift that he's given you.
Oh, that's good. And it's so counterculture, the way that you just described this. I mean, spend 3 minutes on Instagram, and our world, it certainly worships the body. worships the creation and idolizes the creation, and then gets into this thing of comparison, and it's so damaging to the soul. And again, so much research has been done around this, right? Young people taking their lives, and depression amongst teenage boys and girls, and all of this goes back to that idolizing of the body, and keeping that in perspective. Really disciplining that for the use of God is the answer, and yet so many get sucked down this hole. And it's easy to do. It's so easy to do, because most of us can't reach that pinnacle of health and fitness, and so we start to idolize or pursue or whatever, and get it way out of balance.
Yeah, in Jeremy, one of the things about social media is that it really rewards like the ultra elite when it comes to
100%
appearance. So everybody has been given gifts, and some people are more comely than other people. That's just the reality of life. But social media, because of the way all the money that's behind it, and because of the way human nature works, there is like this very kind of unattainable top level, which oftentimes is in and of itself fake. Like it's not even real. Like so a lot of times people will compare themselves to people who aren't even real. Maybe that guy, the young man is watching. He's got a favorite Instagram influencer who is super jacked, and he's a weightlifter. Well, if you got that way taking anabolic steroids, it doesn't change the fact that you're huge, great, but you've actually sacrificed your own health in the pursuit of something that is not true. So it's not true strength, and it's not healthy at all. And so you're essentially going for an aesthetic, and it's an aesthetic that is based around just kind of a false premise to begin with. And so there really is, in terms of self-discipline, and I know your listeners, this is the drum you're beating all the time, is like the discipline of recognizing that's bait. Like what I'm seeing there, and that temptation I have to idolize that standard that seems kind of really out of my reach, that's actually bait that's meant to make me ungrateful for the gifts that I've been given. And that's why Thanksgiving, being truly practicing thankfulness, is such a strong antidote against a lot of those just basically false comparisons that people inevitably make if they're extremely online and spend a bunch of time online.
Man, that's so good. That's so helpful. Yeah, it causes my brain to spin. I think of even, so we can idolize the body, right? But then, in the fitness space, I follow people that are ultra endurance athletes and, ultra runners and those kind of things. Well, that's a different level of human, right? They're genetically not like the rest of us. If you're winning those races,
right.
We can all run them, but if you're winning those races, I ran a 100-miler earlier this year, and I finished in a fine time. It was fine. But like the people who finished before me would finish like 10 hours before me, right? Like, okay, then we're not the same. We're not the same. But then I meet people who are in pursuit of that, and I enjoy training for those kind of things. But it's several hours a day. It's all day on Saturday. It's all day on Sunday, training for this thing you're going to be kind of mediocre. But you're giving up time with your family, and you're giving up time, in church, and you're doing, you've in the same way, you're idolizing something that is unattainable for you. And man, it's so destructive, and yet it's so prevalent. It's funny because we could say, well, if you spend all your time at McDonald's, that's not good. But if you spend all your time training for something that you'll never achieve, that's not good either. And it's finding the balance in it. And this, again, this speaks to, I think, even how you and your wife have chosen to raise your kids, not just on a farm, but then homeschooling them and discipling them. Can you talk about that? Because I talk to a lot of people, and often it's like one bucket or another. I do this thing, I do that thing, and you've really, it seems like, figured out how to. This is our family kind of ethos. This is what we believe, and this is how that line follows in everything that we do, where we live, what we produce, what we sell, what we portray ourselves to be, and then how we're going to raise our kids, and hopefully that generationally continues. Maybe talk about that for a little bit, because I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, it was interesting. I grew up in the public school. And public schools were different back then, but it wasn't like they were it wasn't like they were godly places to be.
Sure.
And I remember I was a junior in high school. Didn't really even know what homeschooling was, but I remember thinking to myself, so I'm like 17 or whatever, I'm never going to send my kids to this place. and I don't remember exactly why the Lord had because I was a Christian, I wasn't like I was, deep in the mires of sin or something. But I do remember just like, I'm not going to have my kids come to a place like this. And so when my wife and I got married, I remember her eyes got like this when I talked about homeschooling. And, thankfully she's just an incredible Proverbs 31 wife. And she was like, she knew about it before she married me, so it wasn't a big surprise, but she was willing to go along with it. And homeschooling is an absolute, it's just, one of the areas that I've somewhat been tempered by in my understanding of homeschooling is that it is truly one of those things that not everybody is able to do. But if you are able to do it, if you're able to give your kids a good, rigorous, Christ-centered homeschool education, it's such a gift. You are giving them such a tremendous blessing by doing that. And homeschooling is not perfect. It's got its issues, which I can talk about for sure. But one of the thing that's most important is just Ephesians chapter 6. Fathers, don't provoke your kids to wrath. Train them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord.
Good.
Nurture and admonition of the Lord. That is like a complete enculturation of Christ. That's not just sending them to youth group. That's not just Sunday school. It's not even just faithful church attendance, as important as faithful church attendance is. It's you raise them when you wake up, when you walk along in the day, and when you go to bed at night. All of that is training them to be a Christian. I don't know how Christian parents can possibly do that and send their kids to the government schools. Vodi Bakum said, if you send your kids to Caesar for their education, don't be surprised when they come back a Roman to you. And there was one time when our public school was largely run by Christians. It had a lot of Christian principles in it. That was a different era. That is not the era that we live in now. And so fathers need to, in particular, not just give up the idea of education to mom. That's not just mom's role. And in fact, that's your role. Even if mom does a lot of the teaching herself, you are still responsible for your family. And the command that Paul gives in Ephesians 6:4 is to fathers. He says, you essentially educate them in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And that doesn't mean that dads need to be the ones at home doing all the homeschooling, but what it means is that dad needs to be taking the responsibility that it's not my school's job. It's not even exclusively my wife's job. It's my job to raise them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And that's where we get things like, if you want to be qualified to be an elder or a deacon in the church, you need to have children who believe. That's a neglected qualification. Many pastors are in positions of authority, and they shouldn't be, because they have what are PKs, pastors' kids? Why is that a thing? Because there's so many pastors' kids out there who haven't been trained up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, but dad is still up there, leading the church. Paul says if you can't take care of your own family, you have no business taking care of the family of God. And so that's why I tell young fathers, any father, doesn't have to be a young father, we all need to be striving. We need to be leaning in, trying to become qualified as elders in our church, even if we're never actually called towards that role, called towards that office. Like, we need to aspire towards that office, or at least the qualifications of it, because that is what it means to be a Christian. It means raising your kids up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And that's why homeschooling has played such a big role in our life.
Yeah, man, that's so good. Yeah, it's that responsibility that the father has, right? We homeschooled our kids. We've done a number of things, but homeschooled our two oldest kids all the way through high school. We used a charter school for a little while. That was helpful in some areas, but they were home all the time. My youngest two kids, homeschooled them until high school, and now they're in a Christian school. And it's been interesting to even watch that happen. I'm thankful for the school they're in. We made some decisions based on, a lot of circumstances that caused us to make that decision to put them in that Christian school. But I'm so thankful they're in a good school. I'm so thankful we didn't wait for or depend on a Christian school to disciple them, because it wasn't going to happen. And just watching them, even in this, Christian school environment, we spend time, at the dinner table every night and talking through a lot of the issues that they're even dealing with in a Christian school environment. But had they not been raised in our home and educated in our home, we'd be having some very different conversations. And so if we don't take that responsibility seriously, then they're going to end up where they're going to end up. And the world is much more aggressive and frankly, better at indoctrinating our kids than we are at training them sometimes. I was talking to Ben Merkel about this, interviewed him some time ago. And he said, parents will say, I'm sending my kids to, whatever school, public school or whatever, as a missionary, and yet not equipping them as missionaries. We're not spending any time preparing them. So if that's what you're doing, then, if that's your conviction, well, what are you doing to prepare them to go to the mission field? We don't just kick missionaries out to the mission field, right? We train them ahead of time. And we have abdicated that responsibility. And it's crazy. I was preaching on Sunday at my home church and just talking about what the Christian life should look like. And yet the reality is that young people are leaving the church faster than they've ever left the church. And why is that? Because they're raised in Christian homes. They're not taught how to live as Christians. They're not discipled. And so they don't know what to do on the other side of that. And homeschooling is not the answer for everyone. You're exactly right. But we need to do the best we can with whatever opportunities and resources we have.
Well, I had said homeschooling has its issues too. One of the issues that homeschooling has is, especially if you have boys and they get into those high school years, things get to be difficult if their only teacher or their main teacher is just mom.
Sure.
Because boys in particular need to have male role models who are bigger, stronger, smarter, faster than them, that they can respect and learn to respect. And so that was one of the reasons why I was a part of the founding effort of Christ the King Academy, which is a classical Christian school here in our area. It's actually a ministry of our church. And the whole idea behind us starting this day school, of which many of my children go to, was that we built the school with the idea of this would be the kind of school that people who homeschool would recognize the value of and send their kids here, because they recognize that homeschooling does have some serious limitations, especially when you get into some of those older years. That's in some of the academic rigor, but also just some of the social components there. So homeschooling is not the only answer out there. It's a huge blessing, especially if you've got a good community to do it in. If you're doing it alone, it can be very difficult. But I'm a huge advocate of getting older kids out of the homeschooling environment if there is a good Christian school to put them into. If there's not, then if we didn't have a good Christian school to send our kids to, we would just continue to homeschool them. But another drum I beat is it's different in every state, but in Washington State we have the Running Start program, where parents can get basically 2 years of free college credits by sending their kids to the community college, and basically taking classes like a college student, but they're really more kind of high school centric classes. But you end up getting free college credits out of it. And I see so many homeschool families sending their 16-year-old off to these programs, and it's not. I mean, it's there. Every parent has to take the responsibility to do what they need to do. But one of the tremendous side effects I see of that is that the academic world, specifically the college academy, it's not the real world. People say, well, they got to get out into the real world someday. But college is not the real world. And in fact, if there was one area that is absolute fantasy land, it's the college world right now. For most colleges, you go there, and oftentimes Christian kids come out of the college experience and they're unrecognizable for Christ. And so I really warn parents, don't just take the easy money for the college credits, because if you were doing this for money reasons, you would never have homeschooled in the first place.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Is like a tremendous financial It's a financial sacrifice to homeschool. So don't like give up right before you actually graduate your kids out just for that allure of free college credits, because the things that they are learning at these community colleges are worthless at best and highly destructive at worst. So I'm very passionate against, when we started Christ the King Academy, I was very passionate that we start with a high school that went all the way through 12th grade. And we really encourage parents, don't take the bait of the free college credits. I know college is expensive, but your son or daughter's soul is not worth it. Or even just they're wasting their time learning things that that you have to then tell them none of that stuff that you learned today was true.
Yeah.
Who wants that to be their education experience ever? We need to redeem the time. In doing that is, I don't believe is redeeming the time.
So when you look at your kid, you have 10 kids. How old are your kids? Not every one of them, but like
my oldest is 16. My youngest is almost 2.
Okay. So across the span. So here's the question. What are the principles or wickets you try to hit as parents with your kids? These are the things I need to teach them. I need to equip them to understand, to learn, to whatever. This is what I'm after. Because and here's why I asked that question. Because you're right. Some people can't homeschool for one reason or another, or just like they can't get their brain around even the idea of what that would look like. Right. Or some parents say, well, we're going to homeschool and then they're going to turn out right. That's not the answer either. Or we need to sacrifice and do what we can to get our kids into a Christian school because the school will teach them right and they'll be right, or whatever your thing is. And I feel for parents that are just looking at, their situations and they've got kids and we'll do anything we can. We'll move if we have to, we'll sacrifice. But sometimes the answer is get them in a different environment. And I just don't think that's the answer. Yeah. The different environment should serve the purpose that you as mom and dad have decided to pursue. So the principles that you've laid out, these are the things we're trying to accomplish. The environment then should serve that and not the other way around. When you think about those things, what are those things? If I can teach my kids these 5 things, 6 things, 3 things, whatever it is, then we will have done what we came here to do.
Yeah, great question. And just to kind of just pile on with what you're saying, if you hide from the world, if you hide from all of those bad environments, some of those environments like the college environment, it's not the real world anyway. You don't owe the world anything by putting your kids there.
Sure.
No, but the fact is, Doug Wilson makes a really good point that you could go off into the wilderness of Montana and homeschool your kids, and you'd find that they brought Adam with them in their heart.
All of the sin nature follows them.
It follows you wherever you go. So there is no retreat far, remote enough to get us away from the Adam that resides in all of us. Yeah. Which is why you're exactly right. We can't just be like, well, I'll just remove all the bad influences and then my kids will be fine, because they actually won't be. They'll find all kinds of creative ways to be sinful. And that's why it really comes down to a mindset of dominion. We would say, I don't need to take dominion over the public school because it's actually not loving to my child to put them in harm's way when they're not fully equipped. So a kindergartner cannot be trained fully enough to go up against their teacher who is, 4 times as big as them and 4 times as old as them. And like, there is no training that can get a 6-year-old ready for that kind of battlefield. So it's really just not loving to put them in a government school situation like that. So it is good to avoid certain environments, but the fact is we have to take dominion over whatever environment we are in.
That's right.
And so one of the primary things that benchmark for my kids is that I want to pass on the idea that, Lord's Day worship is the pinnacle of the week. It's the thing that we're kind of either looking back towards or we're looking forwards towards, but the world centers around that cyclical pattern of the worship of God. God calls us into his presence once a week. He calls us into his presence. We are in his presence, and so we recognize we're sinful and we confess our sins. And then he consecrates us. He changes us through the singing of psalms and the hearing of the word preached. and then he communes with us. He feeds us the body and blood of his son, and then he commissions us back out into the world. And so then we are equipped to go back out into the world and continue to just like the Great Commission says, go and disciple all the nations and see the world of heaven, to see the realities of heaven brought down to earth. That would be like the number one thing that is most important. If a parent only did one thing and that was the thing they did, I would find that to be a tremendous win. Because as Christians, oftentimes we think of church as being, you go if you have time, you go if you like the people, well, we're on vacation, so we're not going to go to church today. It's like, no, I teach my kids when we're on vacation, we find a different body of believers to worship with, because the family of God is huge. So that's one thing. Another thing that is a huge metric for us. This is a somewhat of might seem like somewhat of an odd one, but just how do my kids relate not only to one another, but to people they don't know very well, or to adults or younger kids? Are they able to look someone in the eye and say, hello, hello, Mr. Stalnecker, my name is Jack. I'm 11 years old. Nice to meet you. And a firm handshake with eye contact. Can they do that? Because that's one of the things that life is made up of. Can you say yes, sir, and give people, or are you so unbelievably shy and withdrawn that you can't even interact with the world? You're so overcome by anxiety that you're not allowed to, you don't allow yourself to do that. That's like a huge one. Parents need to recognize that it actually is if your kids are shy, that's something that you just need to work with them on. It's a lot of kids are just naturally shy, and they just need you as their parent to teach them how to get over their whatever anxious thoughts they might have. It's not inherently sinful to be shy. It's just something that you want to improve in your life. But then also just there's of course the subjects. Can they read well? Are they able to spell? Can they do math, science, those kinds of things? But one of the big things in the classical education world, which is what my wife and I are in heavily, is are you teaching them how to learn? Not just how to regurgitate information on a test, but are you teaching them how to learn and how to love to learn? And that would be another just very big, that applies to so many different things. Would be just teaching them how to learn and how to love to learn would be some very broad level things we would be focusing on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Having those in mind, it allows you to make educated decisions about what to do with your kids, right? And even sometimes I think for some parents, it's having very difficult conversations with your kids. Look, this is not our number one choice, but this is where we are. And here's what we need for you to understand. And it's all of the things that you just outlined. And I think that's, it's so helpful. And just being honest with your kids about all that. We're not trying to, we're not great parents. None of us have this figured out, right? We have the Bible, we're doing our best, and we have other parents and other people, and we can read books and all the rest. But at the end of the day, our kids know we're not perfect, but they also need to know what we're trying to accomplish, I think. And that changes the whole conversation.
Well, and parents need to be absolutely unashamed in teaching their own children that to honor them. That the fifth commandment, honoring your mother and father, when you honor your mother and father, not only does God bless you mightily for that, but you're honoring God. And if you are not willing to teach your children that part of being in this family is that you're going to honor your mother and father, not just me either, but you're going to honor your grandfather, you're going to honor your spiritual fathers, you're going to take that fifth commandment very seriously. And you are going to live a life of respect and honor of those who have gone before you. There really is if you're not willing to do that, then essentially you're not even believing those commands of God yourself. Like if I ever have to discipline one of my children for dishonoring their mom, I have to tell them, if I don't discipline you for this, God's going to discipline me because I'm responsible for you. And this is in his law. You got to honor your mom just as you would honor the Lord. And if you don't do that, then it would be unloving for me to let you get away with that. So, but parents have to have a certain level of self-confidence to know this is what we're supposed to do. And I don't have to worry like that I'm somehow serving myself by doing that.
Yeah, that's good. It's good, Joe, man. I could talk to you all day about, I think, all of these things. I really appreciate your time and the conversation. Where can people learn more about your companies, your business, and just you, and the kind of to find good quality content that people can consume and can connect to is very, very important. So where can people follow you and learn more about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So mountcapra.com is our website, and that's Mount like mountain, MT. And then Capra is the Latin word for goat. So mountcapra.com is where you'll find the majority of our products. If you're looking for the more performance side of things, then athosperform.com. Athos is ATHOS, perform.com. Mount Athos is actually a real mountain. Mount Capra is a made-up mountain. There's no Mount Capra in the Pacific Northwest, but because we're surrounded by mountains, we like the mountain imagery. But Mount Athos is a real place. It's actually in Greece, and it's somewhat similar to the Vatican. It's like its own country. It's its own country within a country, and it's where it's a Christian nation. They're right on Mount Athos. It's run by the Greek Orthodox Church, which is a little different than the Protestant world, but it really kind of points towards that idea that Christ is king over all areas of our life. And so that includes your health, and everybody is, God, we are told, the psalmist says, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. There's no amount of your own worrying that can add a single cubit to your height or an hour to your life. But God has made the world in such a way that it is understandable. You can understand risk. You can understand the kinds of things that will give you longevity. And I would just encourage your listeners to have your longevity in mind, so that you can serve the kingdom. Kind of like you said, Jeremy, at the beginning, we want to make as much money as we can so that we can use that money to build Christendom. Not so we can just enrich ourselves, but because we want to be faithful stewards who are given a little bit and turn it into a lot, so that we can grow, we can see the kingdom of God grow. That's what we're here to do. We have three things to thank God for every day. Number one, that He created us and He gave us life. Number two, if you're a Christian, you can thank Him that He saved you from your sins. And number three, you can thank Him that He's given you work to do in His kingdom, and that's important work. And so if you can be healthy while you do that, it's all the much better for everybody, for the kingdom and for you and for all those around you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Joe, thank you. Really appreciate it, man. Hopefully we can have this conversation again. And maybe I feel like we had two conversations, but maybe we'll pick one next time, do one side or the other. But really appreciate you and what you guys stand for. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure to be here.
For everyone watching and or listening, thank you for joining the conversation. Please go and check out the work that Joe and his family are doing. Very, very important. And doing it with integrity and character and with purpose and design, also extremely important. So please check out the work that they're doing. And again, thank you for listening or watching. If you're not yet subscribed, go ahead and do that. We'd love to have you join the conversation. And we look forward to talking to you next time.